So, welcome everybody to the discussion we're going to have this afternoon. I'm Haseeb Ahmad, Head of Equality, Diversity, Inclusion at Leicestershire Partnership Trust, and the session is around talent management in relation to disability. I have a slideshow which I'm hoping somebody will share for me. So I'm going to wait for that to come up. Here we go. This is my support worker, Abby. So hopefully you'll see this is who I am. And I don't normally, my first slide there, I don't normally put all my sort of letters to the end of my name, actual slideshows, but there's a reason for doing that. And I'll explain that as we go through the presentation, and hopefully at some point we'll open up to a wider discussion, questions, and take it wherever you want to take it today. So this is, I wanted to give you a little bit of my lived experience because I think it's really important. So the next slide is a photograph of me as a baby. So I was born in 1969, so 3rd of November, which makes me 51, going on 52. And as you can see, hopefully there's a picture of me there sat on a windowsill. I think that was actually very talented of me at the age of 1.5, or however old I was at that time. Just to say a little bit about me, you may or may not have heard me saying earlier on, I'm actually totally blind. So I've been registered blind since the age of 17. I started losing my sight at the age of 10 years old. I noticed I was getting night blindness, tunnel vision. One of my brothers has also got the same eye condition. And for one reason or another, the diagnosis was missed until 7 years later. Moved school, struggled. It's probably an understatement. Back in those days, in the 1980s, there wasn't a massive amount of help anyway. We didn't have computers at school, so there's nothing around. And of course, because we weren't diagnosed, it was a real problem for me. And I have to say, for a couple of years, I actually skipped school for that reason. I didn't go to school, and I played truant for a little while, went through quite a number of personal problems, but got back on track after my diagnosis, and did a couple of A-levels at the age of 18. Went to De Montfort University. I lived in London with my family back then, so my dad dropped me off, and again, I had no support. There was no disabled students grant, nothing. There was nothing at all in terms of supporting people with disabilities, unless you'd already had that support previously, which I hadn't. So I had to really throw in the towel after one term and a few weeks. I was doing economics at the time, and it was pretty much impossible when you're practically blind, which I was at the time. Couldn't even read my own handwriting. So and then I went back down to London, did a couple more A-levels, reading with one eye. And then I applied for uni again, and this time I went to Leicester University, went back to Leicester for some reason, and this time it was the first year of the Disabled Students Grant, and I got some assistance buying a PC, I got help, I got people to read under tape for me, and I developed a system of working which allowed me to finish my degree. And then when I left university, I was thinking, crikey, what do I do? I had applied to do social work at Leicester University. I didn't get on the course. I didn't do very well at the interview, and they told me, go away, get some work experience. And I thought to myself, what the heck do I do? I'm blind, I don't know what to do. I was going to do social work, get a vocational qualification. And all of a sudden, I was like, I've got to make a decision quick. And I decided to go on a European social funded diploma in information technology which I hated every minute of. I found it so dry and boring, but it gave me a bit of an income for a little while. And then I saw a job in the voluntary sector, which I applied for, and the charity was run for and by disabled people. After a couple of cracks at a couple of jobs, I got a job working for 20 hours a week as an advocacy worker. Went on to do a master's course. Then I got a break in local government 17 years ago. And then from local authorities, I worked my way up to the head of equality and diversity at Nottingham City Council. I moved to the NHS because I was travelling from Leicester to Nottingham and I wanted to be closer to home. So I've been working the last 8 years in the NHS, and I've worked my way back up to head of EDI at Leicestershire Partnership Trust. The reason I'm sharing that story with you is because I think it's particularly pertinent in terms of my journey in respect of understanding what I was good at, in terms of the support that I got along the journey, along the way. But also, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about a wider understanding of talent management. Now, going on to the next slide. Here we go. So this is the other part of me. So some of you may know me. I don't know. I can't tell who's on the call, actually. Some of you may know me. Some of you might not know me. But actually, I'm more than just the head of EDI. I've achieved quite a lot in terms of my sporting endeavours. I was on the GB Paratriathlon squad. I was winning medals. I think I've won all of the colours of medals there is, both nationally and internationally. And I was actually on the world-class programme to go to Rio, but my classification wasn't included. And I went on to set the world's fastest blind Ironman record, Guinness Book of Records record back in 2016, which still stands. And that world opened up for me lots of other aspects of my growth and personal growth. And I think some of the managers that I had recognized that and were really supportive, because obviously holding down a full-time job and a senior position, training, and also traveling to work, you know, people often say to me, Haseeb, how did you do it? Or, you know, do you get time with your family? Well, there were clearly some sacrifices that I had to make along the way. But I think along that journey, I learned a massive amount about teamwork, both because I have guides who guide me in my sport, working with those people. And, you know, invariably, there's been a few times where I've been run into things. My guides have failed to see a dip in the on the course, or I've fallen over, I've crashed on my bike, all sorts of things. And you have to sort of understand, you have to have a very good understanding of human nature when you're working with people whose life, your life is literally in their hands. So understanding that from that perspective, I also learned a massive amount myself about my personal growth and development. And obviously we were involved in a lottery-funded program. We had a development manager, and there was lots of things which I learned in my career as a sportsman, which I brought back into my work as well. So I like to say that I've got many talents, but are they actually recognized? Are the talents of people with disabilities actually recognized in full at work? Do we look beyond the disability? Question for you guys. So next slide, please, Abby. What do we mean by talent management? So here we've got a definition of talent management. It's the methodically organized strategic process of getting the right talent on board and helping them to grow to their optimal capabilities, keeping organizational objectives in mind. And we've all probably got or seen, definitions of talent management. This one quite often, unashamedly, I ripped it off the internet. I had a quick look because I'm doing a lot of work around talent management, particularly in relation to the BAME workforce. But I've got a huge passion around disability, obviously, clearly, and my intersectionality. So I wanted to kind of look at this a little bit more closely. So, you know, there's a lot involved in terms of identifying what positions we're looking at, where we're looking to bring in talent, and how we onboard people and support them. And obviously, when people have got disabilities, it's really obvious, and I'm sure you all know this. You know, making reasonable adjustments is one thing, the practical things that we need to put in place for someone. But what about the attitudes that towards people, and what we might think their talent might be? You know, I mean, clearly, you know, being a blind person, I'm not going to be driving a vehicle. You know, I mean, I knew that a long time ago. I knew that before I was registered blind, that I wasn't going to be able to drive, and there were things that I wasn't going to be able to do. I wasn't necessarily sure about what I was going to do, but what I did know was I had quite a few brain cells between my ears. I knew that I was pretty intelligent. I just needed to find the right opportunity in the right place at the right time, and have really fantastic managers, which I've got to say that by and large, I found that is the case. So slide 5, next one. So this is steps in talent management. You may have seen this as well, around sort of planning. So I think for me, you know, if you're looking at people with disabilities, we've got to look at the whole recruitment journey from the time we advertise. So it's quite interesting, actually, my journey, that the job that I saw in the charities, the very first job that I got, which was literally the springboard for me into my career in the public sector. In fact, there was no internet in those days. I was back in 1994, and my wife saw the advert in the paper. She was my eyes, and the first thing she said to me was that this advert said, we are a double tick disability symbol user. We are underrepresented in terms of people from the Black, Asian, minority ethnic community, was BME community back then, and people with disabilities. And it was an organization run for and by disabled people. And I thought, gee, you know what, this is an organization I want to work for. I really want to work for this organization. They actually want people like me as part of their workforce, and I'm going to give this a real crack. And I did. And how we attract people, how we work with organizations that represent people with disabilities, getting really out there and promoting our opportunities is vitally important. Going through into the selection process, and how we develop people after the selection process, all of that has to be done in a really positive and genuine way. And when I'm talking about disabilities, of course, I'm talking far beyond, you know, sensory disability or physical disability, but also I'm talking about hidden disabilities as well. So your ADHD, autism, the whole of that, you know, neurodiversity as well. And so nobody said it was going to be easy. And then, you know, how we then, when we've got our staff, how do we retain them and how do we progress them? And this is an interesting one for me, because even now I'm thinking to myself, have I had that talent management conversation with my own boss or my boss's boss? And let me go back to my first slide where I added all the little kind of my you know, academic achievements on there. I had a conversation with my current boss about a year ago or so about my career progression, and I just made an inquiry. I said, she's an assistant director in HR, and I just said, so, you know, I'd really like to work towards maybe getting an assistant director role, something like what you do. I mean, any chance I can shadow you, or you know, perhaps you can share with me some of the some of your experiences and what you think I should be doing. And she said, oh, you do know, Haseeb, you need a CIPD. Bearing in mind, she interviewed me. And I said, well, I'm a fellow of the CIPD. Oh, well, you're better qualified than I am. Now, it's interesting that I recall that conversation, because that wasn't the only time I'd actually said that. So I had another conversation with her following on from that in the same vein, and she said exactly the same thing to me again. So I kind of wondered, was she actually taking on board what I was saying? And, you know, does anyone think that I've got more talents beyond the role that I actually do as a head of EDI? Because I certainly know I've done a great deal more than equality, diversity, and inclusion in my life, and I think there's far more potential that I've got to look at expanding my, portfolio and developing me even further. But I need to be personally. I'm the kind of person, if someone doesn't set those stretch sort of targets for me, I'll do it myself. Or as I found a few years ago, I wasn't being stretched, so I went off and I did an Ironman instead. So that stretched me considerably. And then, you know, that and going on around that sort of the whole kind of transitioning people, and that really is about how we look at our culture, the culture of our organizations. Is that the culture in our organizations conducive to be inclusive, right? So I remember hearing this, that diversity is a fact, but inclusion is to act, right? None of this is going to happen if we just sit around waiting for it to happen, right? So we are the agents of change. And by the way, there's a link there for you guys if you want to get hold of that particular. This isn't actually, it was quite a good article that I got this from, and in that article it was certainly something which I felt was really good, that they actually made sure that EDI was very much part and parcel of what was being shared. So what does it look like for employees with disabilities? So what reasonable adjustment processes have been put in place within your organizations? What does the culture of the organization feel like for your disabled employees? You know, talk to your staff networks, talk to your staff, really, really listen, and also get some feedback in terms of what conversations they're having with their line managers. Do you have a talent management process which is truly inclusive? I mean, we're just embarking upon our own talent management toolkit at Leicestershire Partnership Trust. We're piloting that with our exec teams, and we're setting aside some resources to establish a 6-month post to look specifically at talent management in the context of EDI and our protected characteristics groups. Continuing on, inclusive talent management. So in any conversation about talent management, it should be really clear that this is what is being discussed. It shouldn't be woolly. It should be really structured. And the question around someone's disability or long-term ill health should certainly form part and parcel of that conversation. And any preconceptions that people have about someone's ability or disability should be eliminated in that process. You know, and it's, you know, this is about trust. So asking someone what reason, if you know what that they have a disability, you've had that conversation, you built the trust. It's really asking about what reasonable adjustments they need, and making sure that those reasonable adjustments, whether they're to do with equipment or changing someone's working patterns, whatever it might be, it's really taking it seriously and working that through as far as you possibly can. It's not always possible. Sometimes cost gets in the way, but I think a lot of adjustments actually don't cost anything at all. You need to really ask what projects and stretch assignments people want to do. And if they haven't got an idea, work with them, work in collaboration, and ask, if you're thinking about something that you might want to put to them in terms of a challenge, as long as they're in agreement to it, navigate through that conversation. And it may be that they need actually further development. Again, that's a conversation that you need to discuss with them. So think differently. Next slide. I would say, for anyone actually, and let's face it, okay. The number of people with disabilities, if you include hidden disabilities, in the UK is massive. Working population is massive. I wouldn't want to put a figure on it, but even if you look at the number of people with mental ill health, they say that 1 in 4 people have got some form of mental ill health. That's a quarter of the population alone. So when we start to add it up, are we talking about a minority or a majority? Well, certainly a sizable minority if we're talking minorities. I think reverse mentoring can help. So we've got a reverse mentoring program. We've got people with disabilities, reverse mentoring senior managers, and that's been exceptionally good. I've mentioned about listening to lived experience, and I've mentioned the fact that this, the disability is a wide spectrum, and we need to do far more around raising awareness around these different disabilities. And you know what? If you reach out to your own workforce, I'm sure some of those people will help you to run sessions around raising awareness. Certainly that's what we do. So the next one's measure success. So any meaningful talent management program needs to monitor its effectiveness in terms of analysing against protected characteristics. It surprises me. So I asked the question, I don't mind saying this openly, I asked the question in my organisation, is there a figure in terms of, have you identified how many people we are talented? And I was told no, we don't know, actually. We've not really figured that out. We know the number of people who want development through the appraisal system, but actually, has anyone been identified as having, being our talent pipeline or a pool of talent? Not happened yet. Might be quite an emotive subject, but I do think it's important that everyone understands what that looks like. And asking your diverse workforce and those people we talk about here with disabilities, what was the quality of that conversation? So I do think it's really important to, whether you run focus groups or whatever, once you've implemented something, you really need to test out whether it's actually, rather than just a quantitative survey, I think it's good to get some qualitative feedback around that as well. And we need to make sure that obviously the number of people that are accessing talent management opportunities is proportionate to the number of people that have declared, but bearing in mind actually that many people don't declare. In our staff survey, we had 20% people identify as having a disability or long-term illness through the staff survey, but only 5.9 actually declare it through ESR. Right, so in conclusion, so managing the talents of people with disabilities requires different approaches according to the needs of individuals. It should be collaborative discourse, and it needs to fit in terms of culture of inclusion throughout the journey. It should be purposeful, and success outcomes need to be measurable. So that's my little stint in terms of just laying out some things for you to consider. I wondered whether or not we want to kind of open it up for comments, questions, discourse. Let's make it interesting. So has anyone got any questions first and foremost? Any comments? This is a workshop, guys. This is up to you to have that discussion and debate. I'm interested in what's happening in other areas. Charlie? We haven't, is that question's for me? We haven't established a talent pipeline as yet. That is work in progress, but it is something that I'll be engaging in with the head of organizational development, who I'm working very closely with. I do think it's really important that that piece of work happens. We talk a lot about talent pipeline. I'm got familiar with that kind of terminology about four or 5 years ago, when my boss at University of Cross Leicester then was heading up organizational development, and she's talked about the talent pipeline, and I thought it was great, really good soundbite, but actually we don't actually know who that talent pipeline is necessarily, and I think it's really important that we understand that from an organizational perspective, and in terms of individual service areas, directorates. Okay. So thank you for the question about reverse mentoring. So we are in the second cohort of our reverse mentoring program, and I'm the system lead for the reverse mentoring program in Leicestershire, Leicester and Rutland. We initially brought in someone called Professor Stacey Johnson from Nottingham University, and she ran our first reverse mentoring program across the system about 2 years ago, and we had train the trainer training on the back of that, because we knew that we couldn't bring Stacey back in to do it year in, year out. I was the only one that actually ended up showing a real great interest, and I've established a structured program. How easy it's not massively easy, in the sense that there's a lot of work that needs to happen. So you need to recruit your reverse mentors and your mentees. And for anyone who doesn't know what reverse mentoring is, it's basically when a junior member of staff mentors someone more senior, and that junior member of staff, in this instance, from an inclusion perspective, would be someone from a BAME background, disability, and you carry on. You can have any of the protected characteristics in that sort of program. So we started this program last year, at the end of last year. It was the back end of 2020 we launched it. We have 6 peer support meetings for the reverse mentors, and the mentors have to meet with the mentees once a month for an hour over 6 months. We provide them with resources in terms of materials, resources, but the point is that they share their lived experience with a senior member of staff and take them through that journey. So it flips mentoring around on its head. It does take a lot of work. I'm lucky I get some system-wide funding for that, so that I've got an administrator that helps out with all the meetings, sets the meetings up. We've got a newsletter. We've got a web page where we put all the resources and materials and reading and all that kind of stuff. It's really brilliant. It's been absolutely fantastic. And I'll be evaluating the current program probably in the next few months, and hopefully I'll develop a report from that and get some really positive feedback from our mentors and mentees. Our last program, certainly LPT, led to 5 of our very senior managers out of the 7 that were on the program actively taking a real leading role around EDI. So the chief nurse, where we had a head of service who then became assistant director within community health services, became the EDI lead. And we had a non-executive director. Our chair came back on to the second program. She enjoyed the first program so much. People learned so much from it. Anyway, so hopefully that gives you a flavour really of what reverse mentoring can achieve. But it really does give an opportunity for someone to share their lived experience and problems and issues, which senior managers then can take away with them and do something with, which I'm glad to say that many of them are taking it very seriously. There was another question there. Apologies, somebody's going to have to read that one to me. Somebody else made a point, and I missed it because I was trying to answer this last one.
I can read it, Haseeb. Sheila said many HR professionals get confused about how to get information about adjustment needed at job interview and are unclear about what is good and reasonable to offer. Do you have any advice regarding that?
So at the interviews, so obviously it's up to the candidate to let you know if there's any reasonable adjustments that are actually needed at the interview stage first and foremost. So, for example, I will always make it very clear that you know, if there's a test and I'm doing it on site, I'll need to have assistive technology. I'll probably need my support worker. I might need my support worker during the interview itself to help the presentation. And that's Abby. Abby's actually moved with me a couple of jobs, actually. She doesn't answer the questions, by the way. She doesn't help me with the the interview questions. I have to do that myself. But just the practical side of things. At interview, you have to be very, very careful. I mean, I think I've heard a story about somebody saying that at the interview, they were asked the question, are you sure you're going to be able to do this job given you've got a disability? That is an absolute no-no. But what you can legitimately ask is, you know, what reasonable adjustments you might need to fulfill the role. And if the job offer is made, once that job offer is made, that individual then applies to access to work. So you can't apply to access to work for reasonable adjustments prior to a job offer being made. Once the job offer is made, then the individual would you know, have considered or get the opportunity to consider reasonable adjustments. Now, it may be their first job. They may actually not have an idea about what they need. And that's the role of the DWP and access to work with that individual and carry out an assessment. Once that assessment is done, a report was produced and shared with the line manager. And then what costings, there's a split between what the access to work will pay, what the employer will pay according to a number of factors, including the size of the organization and its budget. So it is a process of negotiation. It is a conversation that you have. It's not always easy, you're quite right, but it's really important that, you know, as HR professionals, you know, you do understand the access to work process, and your line managers understand that if and when they are in the process of employing someone with a disability. But, you know, by and large, it can be a very positive process. The exception to access to work is if someone is deaf and they need a sign language interpreter, they can get access to a sign language interpreter when they come for an interview. So that's exception. I mean, the only reason Abby comes along with me to job interviews is usually because I'm usually in a job already, and she very kindly comes along and gives me any support that I might actually need, on the proviso that I take her with me to the next job. So I hope that helps answer your question, Sheila. If not, let me know. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, don't be shy, you could talk, you know. I mean, I'm being totally blind. I quite like hearing people's voices, so do take yourself off mute if you want to. I don't need to see you there, that's fine. Anything else around that you want to discuss around talent management? Have I given you a good sort of idea of the sorts of things to think about around talent management in respect of people with disabilities? Was there anything else you wanted to discuss or understand? I've covered a lot. I'll try to. But I mean, if you do need any future support around this. As I said, I have a lot of strings, strings to my bow. I think that's how the saying goes. And so you certainly don't hesitate to drop me a line. Contact Joy if you want to, but I'm at Leicestershire Partnership Trust. Drop me a line if you want to have a chat. I'm really excited. I want to kind of share some of the work we're going to be doing around talent management. I've been banging on about it for a long, long time, actually, not just in relation to disability, but just generally. As organisations, I think we need to do far, far more in identifying a range of talent, a diverse range of talent, make sure that it's inclusive, be very clear about helping and giving more support to people who actually need it, rather than leaving them behind in this journey, and not just looking at the usual suspects, as lovely as they are. I think we need to sort of start to open up the conversation about absolutely, Sheila, and we do need to encourage those. And I noticed actually in the Workforce Disability Equality Standard metrics for LPT, that the further up the organisation, so there's more people with disabilities below band 6 in terms of our bandings, and then as you go up to bands 8A and above, which is our sort of senior managers and very senior managers, fewer and fewer people declare the further up the organisation you go. And I find it hard to believe that there aren't people with disabilities or long-term ill health or hidden disabilities at more senior levels. So we do need those champions.
Can I ask a question around the gap that you mentioned previously? You said around that the staff survey identified far more people with disabilities, and only 5% declared on ESR. Yeah. So how easy do you think it is for people with disabilities to start engaging in these processes if they're feeling somewhat reluctant to share that they have a disability?
I don't think it is easy. So it's very clear that people are afraid to share that they've got a disability. People feel that they may get bullied. Some people do experience bullying. And, particularly people with hidden disabilities. I mean, I haven't got a choice. I couldn't really effectively hide my disability, but, there are types of disabilities whereby actually, people display certain sorts of behaviors and they're like labeled as being odd, or they don't fit in or whatever. So I think there's a long way to go. And I think the only way we're going to do that, to be perfectly honest with you, is working very closely with people through the staff networks. So I think that's one way of doing it. And trying to encourage more role models to come forward, and really taking this forward in a really positive way. So if you can get a senior sponsor as well, somebody who could sponsor your staff network, maybe your HRD, maybe another executive member, that really helps as well. And yeah, just getting people to talk about it, talk about the experiences, whether they're good or bad, helps a lot in terms of increasing the numbers of people that are confident to declare. Some people just don't want to declare. Some people just say, I don't want to, I don't want to declare. I don't want to be known that I've got a disability. And some people don't feel they have got a disability, even though they're, definition, they fall within certainly the legal definition, that fall, which is somebody who is expected to have or has, a disability for 12 months or longer, which is substantial, adverse, and has substantial impact on their ability to carry out day-to-day activities, something like that. So I hope that answers your question. It's not an easy one to answer. It's a good question and it's a difficult one to answer, Bindu.
Thank you.
So do we have any other comments come through? I saw one flip up from Sheila. I don't know if she made a comment there that I didn't quite catch.
Hi, Haseeb. I just have a quick question. It's Bindu. I'm from Bromley Healthcare. So just a sort of a question really about your sort of experiences of neurodiversity sort of disabilities in the workplace, because that's something that I'm sort of more and more, it's the hidden sort of stuff rather than physical stuff that you can see in terms of disabilities. Have you had, what's your sort of experience of those sorts of things and approaches?
Yeah, I mean, so far we have got people who have come forward. I mean, our staff network has been growing, and it does, you know, it sort of ebbs and flows. So we have some people join, some people leave, depending upon, you know, what they're doing. And noticed that actually there are more people who are starting to join the network, and we're becoming more aware of people out there with dyslexia, autism, AHAD, which incidentally my 24-year-old daughter was diagnosed very recently, actually, and it was all from, just so you know, a conversation that I heard from one of our Maple group members last year. She started talking about AHAD that she'd experienced and all the symptoms. I thought, gosh, that sounds really familiar and very similar to what my daughter was going through. And then mentioned this to my daughter, and she got a diagnosis pretty much straight away. And so I think for me, you know, it's an ever evolving area. We've got to keep on top of it. We've got to keep that awareness and drive going forward. And the more that we talk about it, I really am a big believer in talking. And so I'm glad that one or two of you have actually started talking to me, because sometimes with these virtual things, and I can't see you guys, it feels like I'm talking to thin air, but I mean, I know I'm not. I think talking, having a conversation openly opens up doors as well. Eventually people come forward, you know, and people you least expect. So one piece of advice I would say is absolutely build on your staff networks again. Run some awareness sessions, so get volunteers, get them to talk about what it means for them if they're happy and willing to do it, or bring people in. I mean, that's the other way to do it, is to actually bring in guest speakers around neurodiversity. There's plenty out there, into your organization if you've got a budget, and then run a session and invite people and, you know, get the conversation going there. I was just mention very quickly, really exciting, I just remembered. I have a friend who I started running with a few years ago. So I have guide runners, and he said to me when we first started running, he said, you know, I don't do a lot of talking, Haseeb, I'm quite shy. I said, that's fine. He says, I'll do the talking, until he got faster. I can't really talk very much when I'm running quick with him. But then it came about that he said to me, actually, I said that I'm shy, but actually what it is I'm a high functioning autistic. Now he's a medic at the local hospitals, and he was only recently diagnosed because his kids were diagnosed with autism, and he thought, gosh, you know, what they've got is very similar to my experience. So he got a diagnosis 3-4 years ago, and he never declared to the General Medical Council because he was afraid of being struck off. But he's done more digging into it and he's found out there's lots more medics out there that are autistic. And he's recently come out at the workplace. Can you believe it? He recently came out at the workplace after a conversation with me saying, what do you think I should do? Because they're changing my shifts and I don't want to do those shifts because it's going to, they're day shifts, it's going to cause me problems, I'm going to have to do clinics, I'm going to have to face people. I said, it's up to you, but it may be worth having a conversation with your manager, which he did have. And I won't, there's more to it than that, but I'll stop it there just to sort of say that sometimes just having that conversation brings people out, just building that trust brings people out. I'm conscious there's other people that want to, thank you. Thanks for your question. Hope that answers that. There's a couple of other people I think wanted to come in. I think we're probably done. Anyway, I hope you got something from that, guys. Thanks for listening to me.
Thanks for sharing.
Pleasure.